My name is Kasim Reed. I'm the 59th mayor of the city of Atlanta. Atlanta directly controls 855 acres of land. That doesn't include the land that's a part of the Atlanta Land Bank, Invest Atlanta, the Atlanta Housing Authority, or the Atlanta Public School System. My vision to rapidly expand the amount of affordable housing we have really is to provide real estate developers with the dirt. When you look at real estate projects, the biggest challenge is the acquisition of land. So if we do partnerships with leading affordable housing developers and provide the real estate, then we can really create workforce housing for teachers and firefighters and people who work in government and young people who are entrepreneurs to come and be a part of this great story that is Atlanta. The other thing I plan on doing is auditing all of the projects where city resources were used and a promise of affordable housing was made in exchange. So for example, if you help provide tax financing or tax abatements for a project, and it had 440 units, and the city was promised 44 to 50 units for young people or entrepreneurs or people who earn less than $60,000 a year, then somebody earning $60,000 a year ought to live in that unit. My experience tells me that those units are being placed on the market at market rate. So a unit that should have been $1,600 a month is actually being leased out for $3,300 a month. So I think that there needs to be a full audit of all of the developments that use city resources and made a promise to the city to go knock on those doors and see who's living in those units. So I think that approach is also going to expand the number of units immediately. We also need to do something called a scattered site approach. So we need to let people who live in city-assisted housing buy the unit. So for example, if you live in an AHA facility and you rent, after a certain amount of time, you ought to be able to purchase that unit. I think that that is somewhere between 7 and 15 years. But if you want to create real generational wealth, you'll take an approach where you allow a person to actually buy the asset that they lease for all of their lives. We did scattered site housing on a limited basis before. I think we ought to be far more aggressive about it now. I also want to find out what happened to the $30 million Choice Neighborhoods grant that the city was awarded during my tenure. I have not heard very much about it, but I want to find out whether the city has retained it, and if so, what were we able to leverage? Typically, $30 million should be able to leverage $300 million in new affordable housing development, but those are 4 concrete steps that I would immediately take to move the needle around affordability in our city. Folks also need to remember that Atlanta is 131.5 square miles. So you can put San Francisco, Boston, and Manhattan in Atlanta and still have room. So there is no excuse for us not to have a place to live for everyone. I certainly support density, but I believe if there's an important project, explain it to the neighborhood. I don't believe that you should have a default position that allows someone to come into your community with a project without your involvement. For most people, their home is the biggest investment that they will make during their entire lifetimes. I simply believe that if someone is coming into a single-family area with a dense project, that you ought to bring the community along. And so I'm totally in favor of density, but I am in favor of building projects with the support of people who have been there the whole time. I believe in planning with people, not planning on them. And if you see a project that you believe the city needs, and you are not persuasive enough as mayor to do a zoning change or a zoning modification, then the project probably isn't that good, and you're probably not a very good mayor. During my administration, I'll start with what we did. We ended veterans homelessness in the city of Atlanta and were acknowledged by President Obama's administration for doing so. So typically, if there are 3 homeless people, one of the 3 is a veteran. So there's never an excuse for a veteran to be homelessness. So you always start there. But what you need to do is to take those same strategies that you use for veterans and apply it to the broader homeless population, which is what I would do. The other area that I would work on more forcefully than we did in the past is addressing healthcare and mental health, and being far stronger in spending the money to address healthcare and mental health, because if you don't address mental health, even after you surge resources to get a person housed, they will end up homeless again. They make multiple visits to Grady Hospital. An emergency room visit at Grady Hospital is $1,500. One night stay at Grady Hospital can run $15,000. So there are all of these incentives to get that person stabilized, even if it costs you $100 or $200 or $300 a night. I believe that we should take advantage of all available properties in our region that may have been former hotels or motels, so we have a place to move and stabilize homeless people. That said, I do not believe that homeless people should continue to be allowed to live under our bridges and thoroughfares as long as we have the wherewithal to house them in better housing. It's also important when folks are running for mayor to ask them what they did. My administration passed the largest homeless opportunity bond to build housing for homelessness in the history of the city of Atlanta. So the total package was $50 million. The city's part was $22.5 million, and then private philanthropy matched what the city did. And we had the largest surge of resources of any administration before. Well, there has certainly been a rising crime nationally, but Atlanta's has been disproportionate. So Atlanta's spike has been 57 to 60%. If you look at Houston, which is also a big, diverse city, their spike was 27 to 35%. That's a massive difference. And so my sense is that we have to build our police force back to a force of 1,850 to 200. We have to move officers who are currently on desk doing administrative functions back onto the streets until we push back against crime and violence. We need to use some of the $200 million in cash reserves that I left to run police overtime to make sure that people feel safe citywide, in every community and in every neighborhood. We need to take the human resources function, which is currently in City Hall, and move it into APD. I think that we should go to the Atlanta Police Foundation and ask them to set up a permanent recruiting function as well. But the spend on police has actually risen 18.4% over the last 4 years. So my sense is it's leadership. We need a new police chief, with no disrespect to Chief Bryant. He was a member of my command staff. He's an outstanding man and a good human being, but he was in retirement. So clearly, he was in retirement. We needed a chief that wants to make being chief their career, the hallmark of their career. And I was the person who hired George Turner, who I think was one of the best police chiefs in the history of the city. When he was chief, we had less than 100 people who lost their lives by murder in Atlanta, 7 out of 8 years, and we only went above that once during that 8-year period of time. All of that happened while we eliminated Red Dog, decriminalized marijuana, required officers to wear body cams, asked the GBI to investigate police shootings so that there's a third party that investigates police shootings. So you can have a big, safe city with a robust police department that fights crime in a manner that's consistent with who we are as Atlantans. The first thing that I'm going to do is to create the Mayor's Job Initiative. Now, every child in the city of Atlanta between the age of 13 and 18 will have a job every summer earning $15 an hour for a minimum of 6 weeks. So I'm going to raise the money privately and challenge the business community to help me place these young people throughout the city of Atlanta. What I believe will happen is that companies are having such a tough time hiring people at all, that if you meet a young person who's 13, 14, 15, 16, and you allow them to start coming into their business, and if you allow them to start earning a good wage, my sense is we can create a real pipeline. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to encourage entrepreneurs who have a company with 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 people, as much as I do when you have a company like NCR that brings 5,000 people into the city. So we've got to encourage small businesses and new entrepreneurs and startups. That was one of the reasons that I was such a big promoter of the motion picture and television business, which we grew from $380 million in investment to $9.5 billion sector, employing more than 34,000 people, working in partnership with Governor Nathan Deal. It's the reason that I've been such an advocate and supporter of the technology sector. And so what I will do is to continue to do that. I'm going to create an initiative for the 200 to 300 young men who are frequently referred to as water boys. I am going to have Atlanta be their biggest client. So I will not allow people to continue to serve water at intersections in the city of Atlanta. But what I want to do is to give them an opportunity to start a real company and be entrepreneurs, because Atlanta has dozens of departments that use significant amounts of water every single day. My plan is to support them and lift them up. And so I just referenced the fact that we have real needs from employers to permanently place people. And I think that what the mayor of Atlanta can do is to connect them faster. And so during my previous service as mayor, when joblessness was spiking, I worked with a man named Ed Baker, who launched what's called the Hire One Initiative. And Ed and I used to sit in a room and call employers to get them to hire just 1, 2, or 3 people. When we were done with the Hire One Initiative, we got 14,000 people jobs. And so when you look at our technical schools and industrial artists in that sector, we just gotta work at it and use the force multiplying power of being mayor and applying it to that. Everything that the mayor gets involved in and cares about does better. Because when you shine a light on it, resources that typically would not have come to it, come to it. It's just like the situation with the water boys. I had 40 water boys at my campaign kickoff. And when I did that. Shortly thereafter, corporations started calling me to tell me that they would fund an effort to help the water boys start a real company. And so everywhere the mayor puts their attention and the prestige of the office of mayor, good things typically happen. And so my response is that I would get directly involved with them. And I'm a huge fan of technical schools and colleges. So I just want to lean into that because I feel deeply that the future of Atlanta is going to be around people of all shapes, sizes, kinds, and colors having a job and a shot. And so that's what I want to fight for if I'm fortunate enough to be elected.